At 15, I wrote a letter to a man I hadn't met. The kind who would know which hand I hid my hurt, and offer the other without asking a price. I folded it twice, like prayers do, and slid it beneath a loose board in the motel room where the carpet smelled like old rain. Years later, I'm standing behind the counter of Mrs. Bell's thrift store when a stranger sets a battered envelope down, its flaps salted with ash. He says my name softly, like he's stepping into a cold river. I see my own handwriting looped across the front, and time slides sideways. The room hums with creaking racks and a radio that won't quite tune, and his eyes won't quite blink. He tells me the letter was found among his brother's things, a brother who vanished after a fire. I peel the flap back and feel the paper answer, like a door unlatched. On the first line, the girl I used to be asks if I still know what I promised. The paper smells like attic summers and smoke, and the handwriting leans hard, as if I believed pressure could press my life into shape. I read the part where I told a future husband I'd never ask for more than honesty, that I would rather sleep on the floor than in a bed paid for, with someone else's blood. The words land like coins on a table no one can ignore. Elias watches like the sentences are a glass animal he's afraid to break. He says the letter came in a box of his brother's things, found when a landlord emptied a storage unit. His brother disappeared the week the old Riverside warehouse burned. I hear the rain elbowing the windows and feel my phone buzz with a message from Daniel. Dinner tonight, donors to impress. The girl in the letter looks up at me from the past, asking if I recognize her. I want to say yes. My mouth finds maybe. I text Daniel that something came up, and his reply is the tidy smile of 3 dots that never turn into words. Elias asks if we can talk somewhere quieter, and the way he says quieter makes me hear the noise inside his head. We sit in the break room while Harper pretends to restock mugs and actually inventories my face. Elias tells me the letter was mailed to Miguel Crow with no note, just my old return address and a stamp that's smeared in rain. Miguel worked odd jobs, shot photos of protests, and sometimes slept in the warehouse that later burned. The police called it a vagrant accident. Elias says vagrant, like a bruise you push on to remember where it hurts. He slides a thin silver ring across the table, engraved with initials that are not Daniel's. He says Miguel kept it in the same box. I feel the old floorboard lift under my feet again, and the motel breathe. Elias talks about the night that burned the sky orange. How Miguel called him once, whispering about boxes moving in and trucks leaving without plates. A new development needed an old problem to disappear, and the river knows how to swallow things. I think about Daniel's donors, the way they clapped him on the back, like he belonged to them. Elias says he has a few photos from a disposable camera found in the box. Shots of the warehouse before the fire. Shadows carrying crates. A logo, half torn. He isn't sure what any of it proves, but the ring he brought, those initials, match a name he found in a ledger tucked behind a cracked mirror in the storage unit. DP, I tell him lots of people share those letters. He says lots of people don't send invoices to companies that vanish when you look for them. The girl in the letter had a rule about smoke and mirrors. The woman reading it counts every mirror in the room. I go anyway because refusing clean, bright rooms takes more courage than I have today. Daniel meets me at the restaurant with a tuxedo smile and a touch that calibrates my spine. He talks about zoning, about a riverside project that will wash the city's face, and I hear water gurgle under concrete. When I mention a letter, his brow creases in the place he practices in mirrors. He jokes that we should burn our old words and write better ones, then lifts a glass to donors with hands that never lift boxes. The ring in my purse feels like a small, patient bell. A councilman says something about warehouses, and Daniel's eyes flick to me and back, like a stone skipping. In the bathroom, I read the last line in my letter to the future. Do not forget me when I am tired. The mirror throws back a woman who is. I walk out smelling smoke I can't wash off. The next morning, the city is a damp postcard, and I'm a bad address. Elias texts a photo of the ledger page with DP circled, and an address by the river, a storage lot with cameras that never work. Lucia is folding sheets at the motel when I bring coffee. She tells me not all men are storms, but even sunlight can burn if you stay too long. I don't tell her about the ring. I don't tell her how the letter heats my pocket like a live coal. Elias waits outside the lot in a rusted hatchback that coughs at stoplights. We watch workers move pallets under a sky the color of a bruise, and he says sometimes you need to photograph the absence. Cameras pointed wrong. Logs scrubbed clean. The chain link fence rattles when a truck noses out, plates muddy, logo painted over but not enough. I think of vows, and how paint is only weather's first victim. I tell Elias I want to look closer. Back at the shop, Mrs. Bell produces a cigar box full of keys she's collected from forgotten furniture. She says people leave doors behind because locks remember what we want. Among the tarnished teeth is one labeled warehouse office in Miguel's cramped print. She doesn't ask how I know the name. She squeezes my hand until the ring in my purse presses a crescent into my skin. Harper whispers that Daniel called twice and sounded like a man building a bridge he doesn't want me to cross. I wrap the key in a handkerchief and tuck it in my jacket's inside pocket, where warm breath should go. Elias leans in the doorway like a question. We agree not to be stupid, and then choose a time tonight that is exactly that. The letter in my pocket makes a sound only I hear, like a match refusing to die in rain. It keeps insisting on its promise. Night slides down early and we slip into it like thieves of our own lives. The warehouse office is a throat of darkness until the key clicks and the door exhales damp. The air smells like wet cardboard and old pennies. Elias plays the coward's hero, going first, camera lens gulping light. We find a cracked desk, a wall safe with a dial that moans, a corkboard with ghost pinholes where papers used to be. In the trash, a wad of tape catches my eye. When I unpeel it, a torn corner clings, a logo Daniel showed me once on his laptop, part of a developer's bid. Elias takes photos until the camera coughs, and I shush it like a child. Footsteps? Just water settling in a bowed roof. We listen until listening hurts. The letter in my pocket makes me straighten my spine. The girl who wrote it believed in truth, like weather. I decide to stand in the rain if it comes. Daniel's apartment smells like lemon oil and the kind of money that doesn't want to be sniffed at. He pours wine and asks about my day, voice smooth as a painted banister. I say the store reorganized lamps. He jokes that we should light a future together, and I swallow the ash of the word. When I say the name Miguel Crow, the room tightens its tie. Daniel laughs softly, says the fire was tragic but ancient history, and rests a hand on his phone like it might run away. He says he's helping clean the river district. Sometimes cleaning means making a mess first. I ask about DP in a ledger. He smiles, says lots of DPs pay bills. He never asks to see the letter, which is how I know he knows about it. I touch the ring in my pocket, and it burns colder. Outside, rain begins. Small applause from a storm, who it's for. Elias texts a photo from the warehouse door we left closed. Now it's ajar. We didn't leave it that way. My heart does arithmetic with the wrong numbers and arrives at fear. He sends another. Tire tracks scoring mud like underlines. I stand in my mother's kitchen while Lucia dices onions and pretends not to notice the shiver in my voice. She tells me when I was small I used to hide notes under pillows, asking for tomorrow to be kinder. The future always delivered in its own handwriting. Later in my room, I lay the letter beside the ring and a truth that feels like a bruise pressed to a mouth. I'm engaged to a man who speaks fluently to powerful ghosts. I text Elias one word. Tomorrow. He replies, bring the letter. I stare at the page and think of vows as bridges that must hold weight. I think of rivers deciding whether to forgive. We meet at dawn where the river gums up against a collapsing pier. Elias walks like he's been awake for years. He hands me a photo, grainy, of Miguel with an arm around a boy in a hard hat whose face is half shadow, half familiar. The ring's initials match the boy's badge, just enough to make sense, and not enough to survive court. We trace the pilings and find a place where boards were pried up and screwed down again. Underneath, a dead phone sleeps in a plastic bag the river tried to eat. Elias grins without joy. He's seen grief recycle itself like weather. We pocket the phone and the pier groans in complaint. Somewhere across the water a siren heckles the morning. I think of the girl who wrote the letter, and how she loved mornings because they were promises unpaid yet. I promise her this: I will spend whatever it costs. We dry the phone in rice and prayers. Harper knows a kid who coaxes stubborn circuits awake. He takes the device to a back room and mutters the way mechanics do to engines. After hours of coffee and pacing, the screen breathes light. Messages tumble out like coins from a ripped pocket. Invoices, location pings near the warehouse. A voicemail that starts as wind and ends as a man saying, "They're lighting it tonight." Another message tagged to a contact named DP. "Keep this quiet, you'll be paid." My stomach does a small mean flip. We copy everything. Elias sits very still, hands wrapped around his own wrists, as if keeping from flying apart. He says, Miguel told him there's a difference between being brave and being invited to die. I feel invited. I answer by forwarding the files to myself, Mrs. Bell, and a lawyer I only know from commercials. The letter on the table watches me choose. Daniel arrives at the shop with tulips the color of exit signs. He moves through racks like tide through threads, graceful, inevitable. He says he heard I've been asking around the river and that it isn't safe. He wants to take me away for the weekend. No phones, no news. His smile is the one he wears when donors need baptizing. I ask him about the voicemail, and his hand still's on a sleeve he isn't buying. He laughs too quickly, says anyone can fake a contact name. He touches my cheek. I feel the tremor under his skin, the kind that comes from a man who has kept 2 sets of books too long. I tell him I can't go. He says he understands, then leans close enough that I smell rain on polished stone. He whispers that the past can drown anyone who wades far enough. When he leaves, the bell over the door sounds like a warning buoy. Elias shows me a trick. Tape a small paper flap outside your window, and if it's horizontal by dawn, expect trouble. He says his brother used to do it before protests. That night, I tape the weather down and put the letter under my pillow like a relic. I dream about the motel carpet and Lucia telling me even saints had to eat. Thunder rolls the city onto its side. Around 2, a car idles outside, an engine humming words it won't say. Footsteps reach my door and hesitate. Then a soft scratch where no cat lives. I hold my breath until the tap of retreat. In the morning, the paper flag is a salute. I'm tired of being advised by fear. I put on my jacket, tuck the ring in one pocket, the phone's microst in another, and the letter against my heart. Choosing what to carry is a kind of prayer. We take the files to a reporter Elias trusts, a woman with eyes like lit matches. She listens without interrupting, taps nails on her mug when I say Daniel's name, and asks if I'm prepared for the kind of truth that doesn't hand medals out. I think of the letter's line about sleeping on the floor if the bed is bought with blood. I nod. She says the phone's metadata can place people in rooms they shouldn't have been. She warns me that rooms push back. When we leave, Elias and I stand on the sidewalk and the city feels newly drawn. Edges sharpened, colors dangerous. He asks if I ever imagined the future husband reading that letter would be a stranger who returned it to me. I say maybe the letter was never meant for a man, but for the woman who would need it. He smiles like a door, that was meant to open finally remembers its hinges. The reporter's piece leaks online like a tide that refuses orders. Screens hiss. The river district is named aloud with dates and times, and the voicemail plays under a photo of the warehouse teething smoke. My phone becomes a lit coal in my palm. Daniel calls, then calls again, then texts a paragraph that starts with concern and ends with legal counsel. Lucia sits on the motel bed, wringing a rag until it's a cord, and asks me if I'm safe, which is a mother's way of asking if I'm proud. I tell her I'm both and neither. Elias sends a picture of the pier now crowded with uniforms, and another of a watch pulled from mud. It's back engraved MC, Miguel Crow. He writes, "My brother is speaking." I write back, "I'm listening." When the first hate message arrives, I read it twice and go make tea. The girl who wrote the letter asked me to be brave kindly. I try. The city council schedules an emergency hearing. Daniel's name is spoken in rooms that usually pronounce it like a blessing. His lawyer calls my evidence circumstantial and my motives vindictive. Elias waits in the hallway with a paper cup of water and a face that learned how to carry bad news without dropping it. I hold the ring in my fist and remember the weight of a man's hand that never felt heavy until now. When it's my turn, I say only what I know, that the night of the fire someone promised payment, that a man disappeared, that a river returns what it refuses to keep. I do not say Daniel's full name because sometimes you don't have to. On the steps after, reporters ask if I'm breaking an engagement. I look at the sky for an answer, and it lets a patch of blue show through. I say, I'm breaking a habit. Near midnight, Daniel calls from a number I don't recognize. His voice is stripped of the furniture it lived in. He says he never meant for anyone to get hurt. He says words like pressure and deal and everyone does it, and then the word accident, as if it is a saint he prays to. I ask about Miguel. He says he doesn't know who that is. He asks to meet, just to talk, just to explain how these things happen the way weather happens, and my body fills with old motel air. I say I'll meet him in a public place. He tells me he'll pick me up. I hang up and watch my own hands shaking and think about the letters line that said love doesn't arrive in cars that tell you to get in. Elias texts, "Don't go alone." I type back, "I won't be going anywhere I can't walk out of." We meet in a crowded diner where coffee is an occupation, and everyone eavesdrops kindly. Daniel brings no lawyer, only the gentlest parts of his face. He says the ring isn't his. He says deals happen above and below tables, and he chose a seat without checking the floor. He calls Miguel an unfortunate, like a weather pattern. He holds my hand and apologizes to his own reflection in the window. I wait for the part where he calls me love, and instead he calls me reasonable. A man at the counter turns up the radio and the news says investigators are opening the Rivergate Dam for a search. Daniel's fingers twitch. He asks for the letter, says we can burn it together, grow past it. I say I won't burn a map while I'm still lost. He smiles kindly now, and I feel the blade under it. Sometimes harm arrives so softly you lend it your sweater. They find a wallet tangled in reeds, and a camera half digested by silt. The wallet holds a faded student ID, Miguel Crow. The camera card, once coaxed, shows a final jittery clip of men hauling boxes and a figure in a dark coat turning to the lens before light goes to teeth. Elias watches it with the quiet of someone who has waited too long for the worst. He presses his forehead to mine and we breathe like divers surfacing. I send the clip to the reporter, to the council, to every inbox that ever asked me to RSVP. Daniel calls again and again, as if calls can sweep mud back into rivers. I switch the phone off and sit with Lucia while she mends a sheet, each stitch a small mercy. The girl who wrote the letter believed mercy mattered. I do too. That's why some men will not be allowed inside my future. The story breaks wider. Donors retract like tides. Daniel's campaign site goes dark. A redirection to a statement about serving the community by stepping aside. He texts, Finally, real words. Asking to talk without cameras. Just us. Just the kitchen where we first said the silliest things. The kitchen that smelled like basil and the future. I say yes, but I bring Harper and the letter in my inside pocket. He looks smaller in his own doorway. He says he didn't know about the fire until after. He says he only smoothed edges. He says Miguel could have run. I say he tried and the river kept his feet. He asks if I ever loved him. I say I loved a man who smiled without looking over his shoulder. He looks past me like someone is there. Maybe it's the man he wanted to be. Maybe it's the man he chose instead. I leave the key to the apartment on the table. Mrs. Bell keeps a small ceremony for lost objects. She tags them with string and thanks them for their service before selling them for cheap. She does it now with a stack of boxes from a donor who asked to remain anonymous. Inside one, a ledger twin to the first. Inside another, hard hats with scraped badges. Inside a third, a binder of permits stamped by a clerk who retired 2 years before he signed. We line them up like dominoes and Elias photographs each with the patience of rain. The letter lies open on the counter like a compass I trust more than any GPS. The part about choosing the floor over a bloody bed glows in my head with clean light. I understand now. Poverty taught me inventory. I can list which dreams are mine and which were sold to me. I barcode the truth and stock it at eye level. Elias stands at the river's edge at dusk, reading Miguel's name out loud to water that wrinkles with wind. He cries in a way that isn't loud and isn't ashamed. I stand beside him and say the names of all my old selves who swallowed questions to keep the peace. The sky declines toward violet. We don't hold hands because grief isn't a bridge to sprint across. It's a slow walk where you learn your own weight. He thanks me for the letter as if it cooked us dinner and opened its own wine. I tell him the letter taught me to keep my shoes by the door. If a storm comes, go. If kindness comes, stay. He laughs, surprised by his own mouth, and I love the sound, like a promise stepped on and found sturdy. We watch the city lights switch on like 1,000 small acceptances. The reporter calls. The DA wants statements. The council wants subpoenas. The developers board wants a scapegoat that doesn't wear suits. Daniel disappears for 2 days, and then surfaces with a lawyer who smiles like a lighthouse that only turns on for ships it knows. They lean on the reporter, on Elias, on me, gentle at first and then loud. Court dates stack like crates. My mother asks if I can afford to keep going. I say I can't afford to stop. We change locks. We start walking different routes to work. The thrift store bell becomes a kind of trigger, and then a kind of comfort. The letter lives in my jacket until the seam gives. Harper stitches it stronger with red thread and winks. You'll need that, she says, for holding on or letting go. Maybe both. In quiet hours, I inventory what remains. A mother's laugh under worry, a best friend's fierce jokes, a stranger who brought me back my own voice. A town that can be better than its money if you keep showing up. The letter's paper has softened at the folds from my fingers' oil, and the ink has bled at one edge where rain kissed it. The words still hold. I copy them by hand into a new notebook, not to replace, but to remember. I think of wedding vows we once say, and the vows we are living. To tell the truth. To eat the soup someone made for you. To leave when staying is a lie. To stay when leaving is fear in a nice dress. The river outside the window moves, like a long answer. I open the window and let air in. It smells like wet metal and bread from the bakery downstairs. It smells like a morning not owed to anyone. The storm finally stops asking permission. Sirens scratch the night. We're home in the store closing up when the power flicks and the dark steps in. Phones vibrate with an alert. Flash flood. River gates overwhelm. Elias says storms are truth tellers. They drag what's nailed down to the surface. We pull boards across the door and set inventory high. A knock comes precise. 3 times. Daniel stands there soaked, eyes feral with a man who has outrun the version of himself he preferred. He says he has to talk now, that people are going to say things, and here are the files proving who it was. Not him, never him, never him. He waves a drive like a magic trick. I hear the river in his throat. Harper calls 911 behind the counter. Daniel says I owe him a chance to be believed. I hold up the old letter between us and say I owe myself more. Police arrive with the storm, blue lights wobbling across puddles like guilty thoughts. Daniel's lawyer materializes, umbrella and all-purpose outrage. The drive he offers contains a recording of the developer's CFO pressing him to make the warehouse problem disappear, and a text thread that reads like a manual for cowards. It is proof, and it is also confession. He signed. He showed up. He looked away. The river makes a sound like tearing cloth as thunder belly laughs. Elias squeezes my shoulder once, bone to bone, and I remember what solidarity feels like in the body. Heavier and lighter at once. An officer asks if I want to press charges for harassment. I say I want to press charges for betrayal. He says that isn't in his forms, but the DA might have a version. The letter in my pocket warms as if it knows this is what it was for. Not romance, but courage. Morning reveals damage like a surgeon's bright lamp. The river has coughed up more. Charred beams, a phone case, a wallet that isn't Miguel's, and a box of contractor's stamps that match those on forged permits. The reporter texts a single word. Bingo. Lucia makes coffee strong enough to rebuke grief. Mrs. Bell puts out a sign. Community not for sale. I tape the sign that used to be inside my head to the window where anyone can read it. Elias photographs the town the way you photograph a person you're choosing to forgive. As they are, with the light they have. We hear that warrants have been signed. I sit on the curb and feel tired all the way to the place where I am 15 and writing to a man who might be kind. I tell that girl thank you for believing in me before I did. We host a drive for workers who lost wages when the river took a week off from behaving. People bring blankets, boots, envelopes with unmarked bills, casseroles that steam up the windows. Daniel's name becomes a silence. People step around carefully. No one says future husband. People say neighbor and friend and the good fight. The letter sits in a frame near the register with the parts about honesty and floors and beds highlighted in a way that doesn't need highlighter. A woman asks if I wrote it for Elias. I laugh and say I wrote it for a man who would keep promises. The truth is, I wrote it for a woman who would. Elias hears and smiles into his camera, like a secret just got promoted to a fact. We close late and count donations with cold hands and grateful mouths. When quiet returns, Harper pulls out the spool of red thread and stitches the letters frame to the wall as if fixing a talisman to a ship's mast. We stand a while with the sound of traffic and radiators and newscasters saying, words we earned. Arrests. Plea. Indictment. Elias leans his head back, eyes closed, a smile that hasn't learned the word yet. I think of vows again. Not the kind you memorize, but the kind you live until they memorize you. I tell the room I'm not marrying anyone this year. I'm marrying a life with clean floors and open windows. Lucia cheers like a small stadium. Elias says, careful. I might make an honest woman of you yet. Then flinches at his own cliché. I tell him to take a ticket and wait with the others. We both laugh too loudly. It feels like oxygen finally learned our names. On a clear morning that looks like it never knew rain, I walk to the old motel with a new key. The room still smells like stubborn soap and tired carpet. I find the floorboard where I hid the first letter and slide a second one underneath it, addressed to the girl who will stand here someday and wonder if she can live on honesty. I tell her she can, and that it's cheaper than it looks and richer than it sounds. I tell her to love anyone who shows up with truth and to forgive herself when she stays too long in rooms she meant to leave. I tell her to keep her shoes by the door, just in case kindness arrives barefoot. When I rise, Elias is leaning in the doorway with coffee, not interrupting. He offers a sip, and I taste warmth and a road. We're not in love the way movies want. We're in the part where strangers learn each other by the weight of what they carry. Elias tells me he's traveling for a story upstate. He asks if I want him to stay. I tell him to go, because staying is only tender when it's chosen freely. He says he'll come back with a photograph of a sky so honest you can see the stitches holding it. I hand him the ring with the wrong initials and say to give it to the river, which knows what to do with what isn't ours. He closes his hand around it and nods like a vow. We do not kiss. We make coffee and label boxes for the donation run. We promise to call, which is brave enough for today. The council votes to freeze permits. The developer's CFO resigns to a chorus of silence. Daniel, at last, pleads to a charge that fits his size. The river runs at a normal hunger. Lucia plants herbs in chipped mugs on the motel railing like a future within arm's reach. Mrs. Bell renames a corner of the shop the Ledger, where we keep clean records in a small jar for bus fare. People drop coins in. Sometimes they take them out. No questions, just notes that say, I needed this. I run numbers at night, and they add to something that looks like dignity. The letter on the wall watches over the arithmetic. I sleep easier and wake clearer. I'm not waiting for a husband. I'm waiting for a day to ask me good questions, and I plan to answer. A week later, an envelope arrives without a return address, as if skies mailed themselves. Inside is a photograph, a high blue torn by white, stitched with the thinnest contrails, the sun not performing, just showing up. On the back, Elias wrote, "As honest as I could get." I pin it beside the letter. Customers ask who took it, and I say a man who delivers returns. In the evening, I count the donations and listen to the street breathe. I think about how I imagined love as a room, and now I know it's a weather system. Sometimes it breaks, sometimes it clears, and if you keep your shoes by the door and your kindness in your pocket, you'll be ready to go where it's gentlest. On a Sunday morning, the bell rings and a man who looks like a road walked in his shoes steps through. Elias, back, sunburned and smiling like rain after all. He holds no flowers, no speeches, just a paper bag with pastries and a gaze that says he kept all the agreements we didn't write down. We work the counter, and the day unspools. When business slows, he asks if I want to go see the river remember us. I nod. We lock the door, but leave the sign flipped to open because some doors should stay that way. Down by the water, he throws the ring with the wrong initials, and we listen for its small, perfect splash. We don't say anything for a long while. The letter didn't predict this moment. It only asked for it to be honest. It is. That's enough. For now, that's everything.